The image of the American church. Sweet little chapels, city churches with high steeples, bells, country churches with white exteriors and oak pews, stained glass windows, chimes ringing, grand pipe organs, majestic choirs, sweet little country choirs, sweet little grannies, hymns. This is the American church that I grew up with, the American church that I've grown to love. And then we come to the church in the Wildwood. A little bit like Jordan River's church. Doesn't abide by the rules. You know, it's log cabin and it's beautiful but it's country and you know, and there's coffee and popcorn and there might be some homemade cookies afterwards and it's a whole different feeling of the grand and the majestic. It's like the little church in the Wildwood and you have to find your way there. I'm going to talk about the Wilderness Tabernacle today, but there's some things that God has given me. I flipped through the words from 2019, prophetic words, and 2017. Next week you'll receive them in your packages to take home, that God has said, do this and do that. When God speaks, we do all in our power to do exactly what he tells us to do at the moment he tells us. Since the beginning of 2020, these have been the words. They're not normal words. They're not even in paragraphs. In fact, they feel like a Jenga, that puzzle that, you know, it's kind of square and you got little pieces and you put them in. And it feels like I'm having to figure out a puzzle. And I don't see the whole picture this year. You know, I told Amy when she recorded this, I'm going to be as real as I can be with you today. In January, the word was given, quarantine your house. Quarantine yourself in the household of faith. And I can remember laughing. Because in that message, the name of the message was, is there enough Jesus in the house? And I remember I just loosely said, make sure you buy your toilet paper. If you're going to have to quarantine, buy your toilet paper. I said it as a joke. It wasn't a prophetic word. And yet, I tip my head a little sideways on that now. I remember the word discrimination on January 23rd, and I thought, Lord, what does that mean, discrimination? Who's going to get discriminated against this year? Now I look at all the movements of the people that say they've been abused, discriminated against, that they don't have the same rights. In February, it was silent. I didn't hear any prophetic words. In March, I heard this will be diminished. Lockdown till Easter. The next morning, I woke up, turned on the news, and the president said, we will lock down until Easter. And I said, Lord, that never happened. He said, no, but I wanted you to know you heard me. So I gave you a word that was confirmed. I heard the word reboot the system. It hasn't occurred yet, but it doesn't mean it won't, because I know I've heard from the Lord. In April, I heard, stand within the eye of the storm. Don't go into the storm. And I gave a prophetic word and a message on that. In May, I heard the words, if you try to save it, you will lose it. If you lose it for my sake, you will find it. Are you prepared to lose it? There's a whole message on that. July 1st, I heard the word, the harvest is coming earlier. What does that mean? Have you ever asked the Lord, what does that mean? And I complained. And I told the Lord, Lord, last year you gave me a word that the weather will mirror the hearts of men below. I haven't seen that come to pass. He said, oh, really? It's hot and it's dry. Men are hot and they are heated. And the weather is hot. The land is dry. There's a drought on the land. And it mirrors the heart of men. Because they're as dry as you can come. There's no Spirit of God moving on them. There's no rain of the Spirit. And he began to talk to me. I thought, well, you're right. Okay, Lord. So I began to look at the words that God was giving me. Even the little Jenga puzzle pieces. Reboot the system. This will be diminished. Lockdown till Easter. The harvest is coming earlier. And on July 5th, he gave me a word that said, there's a coming debris field. And I thought for sure I knew what that meant, and I had no clue it meant. There's a coming asteroid debris field that the earth is passing into. I thought it was something spiritual. July 7th, he said, there'll be a medical collapse. July 7th, he asked me, can you stand alone? It's a little spooky when God asks you if you can stand alone. And then he said, I will inhabit the praises of my people. I knew what that meant. Paul and Silas in jail. Totally alone. And yet, they were not alone because he came and inhabited their praises. Okay, God, I can stand alone as long as I can praise you because you'll inhabit the praises. That means I won't be alone. You'll stand with me. And I began to reason with God. July 19th, he said, there'll be cut off passages. And what does that mean, Lord? They'll reroute roads. Pray continually. The ground will become unstable. If one of you get off track, the other one must pull the other one back. And at 6:38 in the morning, I heard the words, trial run. Lord. So I write these down in my phone. They don't make sense to you. They don't make sense to me at the moment. But I know I'm hearing from the Lord. I wake up, there's no phone and no internet. And for 2.5 days, there's no phone, no contact, and no internet. I'm puzzled. I don't like this trial run. What does this mean? On July 26th, I heard the Lord say the church will go into the wilderness. I'm going to take the church into the wilderness. On July 29th, he repeats the words, the harvest is coming earlier. On August 14th, he says, many who are rich will become poor. On August 18th, he said, hide in the cleft of the rock. And on August 19th, he says the horses are in the gate. They're in the stall. I looked at him and I said, Lord, every one of these words are significant. I know, yes, scientifically we are coming through an asteroid debris field, and you're going to hear a lot of talk about it. I had no clue. I know they're getting ready to reboot the system. I know there's a pesky fly flying around me. I understand the word of the Lord. He said the harvest will come earlier. I'm taking that as not a physical harvest. I'm taking it as a spiritual harvest. Things you've waited for your whole life. Your children to come home. Your husband to give his life to the Lord. God is going to bring the harvest that you have sown into earlier. You're going to reap it earlier. I understood those words. The ground becoming unstable. Scientifically, that's what they're saying is happening. And I like the word of the Lord. But then I questioned him. What do you mean you're going to take the church into the wilderness? And this is what the Lord said. Okay, all you out there, it's a Sunday morning. Half of you in your PJs. Some of you think that I'm slacking because you got a couple weeks off to recover from an upper respiratory infection and a couple had COVID. So you think that I'm giving you a little breather. I'm not giving you a breather. I'm actually going to require more of you. The image of the American church, I'm really into oak and steeple bells. But I live in a church. I have a church that's an oak church. It's a country church, log cabin. Looks nothing like the city churches. And then suddenly I hear, I'm taking you into the wilderness. Moses was called by God to lead the Israelites. In chapter 8, Pharaoh called Moses forward and he said, "Go sacrifice to your God in the land." Here in Egypt, Moses said, "It's not right to do so, for we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then will they not stone us? Now we're going to go a 3-day journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he will command us." We're going to go to church in the wilderness. I know. We've got Egypt and we've got all this splendor and look at the city and big pyramids and it's absolutely gorgeous. No, we're not sacrificing here. We're sacrificing and being obedient. God said go 3 days into the wilderness. A lot can happen in 3 days, by the way. So Pharaoh said, "I'll let you go that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only, don't go very far away." Shut up! Don't go very far away. Intercede for me. Let me see. I'm holding your people in bondage, and I'm asking you to intercede to your God for me. Goshen was a place of separation. Goshen is where they lived. Egypt had the plagues. Massive amount. I mean the plagues. But in Goshen, there was provision. There was protection. The children of Israel were sighing and groaning because of their bondage. They kept crying and crying and crying. And I don't know if you've ever had a child that will not stop whining. I don't really give in to the child. I usually set them on the couch and tell them to knock it off. But God heard their cries. He heard their supplication. And he remembered his covenant. Let my people go so they may celebrate a feast to me in the wilderness. Pharaoh had reduced them to severe slavery and infanticide. He killed their future. He killed their babies. He killed their sons from infancy. There was absolutely no hope. They were in bondage. It reminds me of the believers in other countries. The bondage that they're under, even in China. We'll imprison you, But if you give birth to a child, we'll take the child and rip it limb to limb. We will kill your children. We will kill your future. We will kill your hope. And they cry out to God. See, the Jews and the Hebrews had escaped their bondage. They had escaped their oppressors. They had been rescued and taken out of Egypt by the Lord God Almighty. He had proven himself time and time again. And yet they chose idols to worship. And he said, I'm going to take you into the wilderness. When I heard the Lord say, I'm going to take the church into the wilderness, I freaked out a bit. I thought, but Lord, what does that mean? He said, some churches will go bankrupt. Some ministers are going to struggle. They will not know what to do. Some will lose their ministry. Leadership that was once stable and strong will no longer gather. Many will compromise. Wow. Moses was fed up with it all when he saw the people begin to worship idols. He was going to pull back. He was going to recluse himself. He was going to delete his Facebook account. He was going to step out of ministry. He was going to throw in the towel. And God said, no. I actually want you to go and build a tabernacle in the wilderness. And I want you to get away and I want you to go worship me. God is calling his people to a place that is uncomfortable, a place that you're not used to. He's going to call you out to a place where there's no frills and no fluff. The things you're used to, that church used to, those memories, they're not going to be there anymore. I'm really sorry. Things are going to change. It's going to be you and Jesus. I wish I could tell you what I really know and what I see. And I will try to be very honest. But I see that he's going to strip the church to nothing. And he's going to call those that will worship in the wilderness. They will worship with their whole heart, unabandoned. They will stretch forth their arms. They will gather. And it won't be about who's dressed the nicest. It won't be about your social stance. It'll be about, I've got to have God. No matter what, I've got to have God. What we've laid in store in the churches in America won't be there no more. There will be people that find comfort to sit on their couch and watch from a distance. There'll be people that'll never again gather. Their choice. God is calling a remnant that not only will gather, they will purify their heart. They will be intense about God. They won't care that it's a place in the wilderness that God is calling them. In Exodus 33:7, Moses took his tent and he pitched it outside the camp. He was so irate and so disgusted with the idols, with what they had done. He said, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. And he took his tent and he pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp. And yet they could see. It was right over there, a long distance away. He called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting that was outside the camp. And I heard the Lord say, I'm going to call the church outside of their comfort zone, outside of what they knew. And I'm going to require of the church to trust me. I'm going to require that they understand that their hope is placed only in me. My provision. I'll tell you, there was something that happened in the wilderness. They learned to trust the Lord. They learned to trust He would feed them, He would clothe them, and He would provide for them. It's not all bad to be in the wilderness. But when God tells you you're going to learn to trust me, and I'm going to care for you, you're going to learn to worship me in a whole different way. It may not be the perfect hymn on the piano that's being played. It'll be here. You'll begin to worship me in spirit and in truth. That's what I'm looking for. And so it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent door, and they watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. And it came to pass, when Moses entered the tabernacle, that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord talked with Moses. All the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshipped, each man in his tent door. I'm wondering why they didn't leave their tent and go out. I see the presence of God right there. Why on earth am I standing here when it's there? And that's what I hear the Lord say. Why on earth are you staying here in your little comfort zone, all quarantined and tucked in safe, when my presence is right there? And I'm not saying you can't have the presence of God in your own home. I'm saying that God is going to call people out, and He's going to say, this is not comfortable for you. This is not what you expect. It may not be a 10 o'clock Sunday morning experience. It may be a Thursday night cell group. It might be a Sunday evening when He calls you together. It will be different. But He said, I will take the people, the remnant church will go into the wilderness, and there they will find me. I don't like to get out of my comfort zone. Personally, some people have said to me, I don't like to get out of my pajamas. It is so much fun to just sit in my PJs on Sunday morning. I've gotten pretty comfortable with this COVID thing. Don't get comfortable. And don't think you're going to just get away with sitting on your fanny and doing nothing for God in these last moments. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm going to tell you, our church is not a lazy church. We are not a people that are slothful. When God moves outside of the camp, we better be going where God's going. If God moves outside of our little log cabin, it's a beautiful little log cabin, by the way, and I like the frills and the fluff of the simplicity. But what if God ain't in the building anymore? What happens when God leaves the building? I'd better be right on God's tail. That's where I'd better be, is where God's going. So I said, okay, God. You're going to take us into the wilderness? What's that look like? I had a woman from church, Susie, asked me, do you think being exposed to COVID and having to quarantine the church off and pray for sick people, and you yourself were really sick with an upper respiratory infection, and I just don't get sick. I actually called John and Julie Miller, and they called and prayed for our church. Thank God they prayed. Thank God that a couple of other churches not too far away actually said, Pastor Deneille, we're praying for your church because we knew your church got sick. And it wasn't the person's fault that came to church. They didn't know they were sick. And I'm never going to bawl them out. Nor do I really care that they didn't know. What I'm really concerned about is, did we still pray? Did we still believe the Lord? Did we still believe in healing? Did we still take our communion? Did we still remember to love each other in the middle of the whole fiasco? So they asked me, do you think that was the beginning of the wilderness? And at first I said no. But I learned some things. I learned who's got your back and who loves you because they love you, because they're connected in the body of Christ. I've learned that the church as a whole is not Jordan Rivers. It's never been. We've never looked at it like that. We're connected to a little church across town, a little Methodist church, and we prayed for one of their children that had COVID. And another church said, you know, our church has really been healthy. But Deneille, this week we prayed for your church because I know that you had some people that were sick. Pastor Jess and I were sick. We had the thickest snot, just massive amount of upper respiratory. No, we didn't lose our taste buds, but we were exhausted and weary. I don't have a problem. I'm not going to put on a facade and pretend everything's peachy and call church. No. I said stay home. Call church off. We're taking a sabbatical. There's a quarantine. This will be our third Sunday. Our third week with no services. Everything's been canceled. Let our people heal. Let them be restored in health. And they've been praying for each other fervently. Today, just before I began to minister tonight, I've heard that most of them are recovered 85 to 95%. There's still a couple of them that are like, we're still really weak. Keep us in prayer. So I told people, pray another week. Pray another week. Do you know what it's like to wake up in the morning and see the text? I'm praying for your church and all of your people. I'm on this, Pastor Deneille. And you start getting a little message. I've got it. I prayed through the night. I fasted today and was praying for your church body. See, that's what God is calling out. He's calling a remnant church that from every nation, and I believe they're all going to experience it, they're going to realize I'm going where God's going. Remember when he said, hide in the cleft of the rock? I said, Lord, I don't even know where the cleft is. How am I supposed to hide there? And he gave me an image of a father that brings his child really close and pulls his robe around them. And there they hide and remain and stay as the storm circles, as chaos breaks out. They're hidden in the cleft of the rock in the wilderness. I tell you what, when God moves out of the camp, I'm going where he's going. Are you going with me? Because that's all I want is his presence. Nothing more. And I'm not leaving his presence. I'm on God's tail. I'm right beside him. See, the holiness of God has been missing in the church. But without his Spirit, the church is nothing. We in America have our freedom. We've built our monuments, our grandeur, our mega churches, our enormous sanctuaries with hundreds of staff. And many of them are now empty. Bells are silent. The choirs no longer sing. And the church is in isolation or quarantine. The coming wilderness church will be a church with no fuss and frills. For God has removed and pulled you out of Egypt, where there was a provision of sorts. You had, at least you had onions. You had this, you had that. And he's taking you to a place where all you'll want is him. I'm going to have to depend on you. You're going to provide for me. I'm going to look to you only as my source. God, I know you're going to walk me through this. God, you're going to be the provision and provide for me a job. I had a woman this week say to me, I have no clue what I'm going to do for work in the future. My job is on the line. You're going to trust God in the wilderness. You're going to trust him with your whole life. There is coming a complete separation between the remnant and those that will bow to the world. No longer will any government influence or dominate. No longer will they dominate or influence the true church. They will follow the people of God, the remnant of God will follow after the one true God, no matter what. And they won't back down. The wilderness came before the promised land. Was there a reason for the wilderness? That was a good question. I believe in the wilderness we're going to find that God is going to purify us one last moment before his coming. Come on. Get yourself pure. As you lay to rest tonight, just a second, let me grab this. As you lay to rest tonight, as your eyes close, am I the one you're focused on? I don't know where God is taking us as a church, but if he said he's going to take us into the wilderness, I'm ready to go. I know there's people that have been in their houses for quite a few weeks, and they simply had to trust God with their lives. And to be sick these past couple weeks, some of them, not all of them, but some, they've learned to trust God with their health. And they called and said, can you pray for me? Yes, we can pray for you. But because I was sick, Pastor Jassa was sick, I called on our people to pray. And do you know what they did? They prayed. They didn't just expect the pastoral staff to pray. They prayed. I love it. They were the church. The wilderness, a place of complete dependence on God. The wilderness, a place of refuge in homes and outdoor gatherings. Will we gather in our building? Yes, as long as we can. We're learning we're going to gather wherever God says to gather. The underground church, the barns in China, I'm amazed at where they gather. Bill Moyers said this, when was the last time you thought of going to church as dangerous? In the future, it could be that. It could be dangerous to go to church. Some will run and hide and quarantine themselves. They will not be able to handle it. Others of you have lost your identity and you're just following after God. Wherever he goes, you'll take the risk. You've lost all your idols. You've laid everything aside to go into the wilderness. It's going to be a place of complete trust and a place of miracles. They have followed after a God who would lead them away from the luxury, from their own provision, to trust simply in his provision. Get me out of my comfort zone. Who's going to pray that? How many of you guys wake up in the morning, oh, please, God, take me into the wilderness. Get me out of my comfort zone. Yeah, right. But I know that some of you can feel the separation coming. You can feel the separation that the church is going through. Yesterday, a minister I know said that he was dark. He was dark. Both Jas and I just looked at each other and said, why would a minister say that he is dark? Did you just hear that? That's like saying, I'm all dry and shriveled up. My soul is atrophying. It's all dried up. My spirit is parched. I'm dying. I'm dark. I'm going to tell you, there's been a lot of desert wanderers that have been looking for nourishment. And they're going to find it. God is going to pull you out, and he's going to say, into the wilderness, find my tabernacle, and don't leave it. When you see my presence come to dwell, make sure you're standing right there. Don't stay in your own tent. Don't stand in the doorway of your tent. Get your little fanny and get where God's going. Some people are purely lazy, and you know it. You've made your excuses. You know what? It's so good that I wasn't there. I could have caught a sickness. Oh, I don't want to be anywhere around anyone with cooties. You'll never be able to protect yourself until you have learned to rely fully on God. Come hell or high water, come death or life, come famine or feast. God, you're my provision, and I will simply trust you. The blood is over the mantle, over the doorposts of our lives, before they went into the wilderness. And I love this. In Psalms 105, verse 37, it says, and he brought them out with silver and gold, and there were none feeble among the tribes. Do you know why? The night before, they all took communion. You guys, some of you might say, gosh, Pastor Deneille, you have just harped on this communion thing. Day in and day out. Every day, take your communion. Get your communion. And that night when they took communion, everybody got healed. There were none feeble. Every person that was crippled, every old person that was shriveled and had no strength, every person who had been sick in the land was healed. Because the scripture says there were none feeble among them. How do you think that happened? When they broke the unleavened bread and they shared it. When they drank the goblet with wine. When the blood was over the mantle and doorposts. Everybody that came under it. There were none feeble. I am believing God, every person in our church, there's none feeble. I am believing that everyone is saved. That all the children come home. That moms and dads and families are joined together. That as we get ready for the coming of the Lord, the last of our luxury and the last of our stuff that we love so much, he'll pull it away from us. For where your treasure is, your heart's going to be. And we'll be ready, and we'll begin to go into the wilderness and say, I really don't need that. It's not who I am. It holds me on this earth. I don't need my fluff, my frills. God, purify my life. Purify my heart. Purify my mind and my thoughts. And God, if you have to take me into the wilderness so that I find you in my own tabernacle, okay, let's go. And that's where God's taking the church. He'll be your provision. He'll be your source. He'll be your healing. He'll be your strength. And there'll be none feeble. I'm believing that as we get ready to leave this earth, which I believe, and I am looking for the coming of the Lord. And by the way, there is a candlelight Watchman's Eve service on the night of the Feast of Trumpets until the trumpets blow and the sliver of the new moon has been seen. We know it can take 2 days because no man knows the day nor the hour. So on the screens at the church, every screen will have the wall in Jerusalem live. And you can come in and you can have a bite to eat, or you can fast and you can pray. And there'll be a candlelight Eve service because I need to remind our body. Guys, we're getting ready to go home. And if God is calling the church into the wilderness to purify them, to leave aside all their crap, all their junk, all their luxuries, all their toys. And he says, come on, come with me. Come with me to the place where you and I will meet. And you can get real with me. I'm preparing a bride, and I am getting ready to call her out and to bring her home. Where God's going, guys, we're going. Now, I know this message is so different from the message when I preached it a month ago, because I'm just talking to you right now. But God's bringing the church into the wilderness. You better start asking him, God, what does that mean for me? Are you taking something out of my life I don't need no more? Where are you bringing me? Lord, whatever it is, I need to be going in the direction that God is going. I love you guys. I want you to take communion today, and I want you to find a quiet place. Just you and God. And I want you to find your wilderness place. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to get your prayer shawl and pull it up. Maybe you need to go stand in the corner in the quiet. I don't know where it is, but I want you to begin to get real with God, because when he says he's taking the church into the wilderness, I'm chewing on that a little bit more. When he said, I want you to hide in the cleft of the rock, I want you to mold those two words, taking the church into the wilderness, and I want you to hide in the cleft of the rock. I'm still questioning God. Where's the cleft in the rock, Lord? Where's the cleft in the rock for me? This week, find the cleft in the rock and begin to hide there. And get out into the wilderness and find the presence of God where everything else doesn't matter. I love you. Father, I just thank you above all else, above every kingdom, above every throne. We worship only Jesus. Father, I thank you. You are purifying our church. You are getting us ready for the coming of Jesus. You have looked at us, and I pray that you have found us without spot and wrinkle and said, that's my bride. That's the bride of Christ. And I'm getting ready to bring them one step closer. And Father, even as we walk into the wilderness, to the tabernacle in the wilderness, thank you, you meet us. Thank you, you keep us. Thank you, you purify us. And Jesus, hide us. Hide us in the cleft of the rock. And I thank you. I thank you, Jesus. I'll see you guys next week.